Good afternoon, West in the world. It is Tuesday, December the 8th, and we have reached the final week of this semester with our final exam on Friday. There are just a few points that I'd like to make reflecting on this morning's theme about the end of the Cold War. We talked over the last week about the dynamic features of the Cold War. The fear of nuclear holocaust, the ideological struggles between the United States and the Soviet Union, the effect that it had in spreading violence and unrest throughout the world and in shaping the era of the end of European empires. What we have tried to say is that the Cold War itself was a defining moment, the defining feature of the second half of the 20th century, and that really no one could have predicted in the build-up to the 1980s that it would end as it did, that it would end so quickly and so decisively with the collapse of communism. In class today, we tried to highlight a couple of things. One, some of the ways in which people were responding to the uneasiness created by Cold War dynamics. So when we talk about movements like the rise of the student population and the student protest movement, the women's rights movement, or the emergence of the counterculture, we need to recognize that all of this is happening as part of a larger reaction to the unsteadiness of living in the Cold War era. We also then talked about the specific events that contributed to the end of the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact. We said that maybe some of this could have been seen, that events like the Prague Spring of 1968, the uprising in Czechoslovakia and the subsequent crushing of it by the Soviet Union, maybe suggested something about what was likely to happen at the end, but no one really saw those as predictions at the time. So what did cause the collapse of the Soviet Union? Well, we identified, I think, four specific things. Number one, the fact that the Soviet Union in the late 70s and early 80s entered a period of tremendous economic depression. No one really understood this at the time, but this was probably the most important factor. Number two, and related to it, Moscow was fighting its own quagmire war, analogous to the American war in Vietnam, in Afghanistan, and suffering from an unpopular and unwinnable war. Number three, there was a problem of unrest in the satellite states, those Eastern European countries, especially in Poland, with the emergence of the labor union and the underground political movement called Solidarity. And number four, was, of course, the rapid changes in leadership at the top that occurred between 1982 and 1985. As one generation of leadership, the Brezhnev, Chernenko, and Andropov generation passes away, and leadership transitions into the hands of Mikhail Gorbachev. We concluded then by talking about how Gorbachev reforms the government, the policies of perestroika and glasnost, the decision to withdraw from Soviet commitments and agree to plans of nuclear disarmament, all begin to sort of open what becomes a floodgate as Eastern European states, beginning with Czechoslovakia and Poland and eventually East Germany and Romania, with varying degrees of smoothness or violence, transition out of the Warsaw Pact to create a new Europe, a new Western world. We said that when Gorbachev resigns, Christmas Day, 1991, from the presidency of the Soviet Union, it is from a country that really has ceased already to exist. And that then opened up the door for our transition to Thursday's class, as we'll talk a little bit about what the world has been like in the years since the Cold War. Looking forward to that. Good luck with your final preparations for the exam. See you on Thursday.